No. Hey folks, my name is Jen, and today we are going to have a little chit chat about what I read in March, which was not a lot. So I had a fairly ambitious stack for March as well. I did do some reading. I read some more in Fanny Burney's Evelina, and I also started The Maid by Nita Prose. I started reading that while I was on our little getaway up in Vermont with some friends, and while I did enjoy it, when we got back I just kind of put it down and I didn't pick it up after that. We're going to talk about what I did read in March, which was shockingly only 2 books. So, but there is a reason for that, and the reason is this big chunky motherfucker. So first of all, let's talk about, I guess, the shorter of the books, which is The Clocks by Agatha Christie. So I read this while we were on our getaway because I typically enjoy reading mysteries when we're like staying in a cozy house. So this is a book following a young woman named Sheila. She is a typist for this company. She's like a typist for hire, I guess is what she is, and she is called to this house to type up like letters or a manuscript or something for a woman. When she arrives, she discovers a dead body. The only other witnesses surrounding this event is an older blind woman whose house it is, who has just arrives home just as the young woman makes this grisly discovery, and a mysterious young man who happens to be passing by the house outside and catches her when the girl, of course, runs screaming from the house. The strange thing is that besides there being a body of a stranger in the house of a blind woman who had no idea he was there and doesn't know who the man is that he was also surrounded by clocks. Now, I heard on the back that he was surrounded by clocks, so I was expecting something pretty grisly and odd and, you know, just having clocks spaced around the actual body, like on the floor. No, what the clocks actually are, there's like 4 clocks that don't belong. I believe there's like 5 clocks in the room, and one of them is supposed to be there and the others are not, and they are spaced out on like the mantelpiece and furniture around the room is what it is. So it's still really weird, but it's not quite as creepy as what I was thinking in my head when I read the description of this book. So that's one thing. The second thing is that this is supposed to be a Poirot mystery. It says Master Sleuth Hercule Poirot has time on his hands. Haha. But the thing is that Poirot's not even that directly involved in this. This story is actually being told... I think my bookmark's still in here. Haha. This story is partially told by the young passerby, the mysterious passerby who caught the scared young woman, and it's also partially told just in like 3rd person base. So it's weird that it kind of switches back and forth between them. So that's something. The other thing is that this young man, his name is Colin, he actually brings the case before Poirot. So he knows Poirot because Poirot knows his father. They kind of hint at who his dad might be, but I'm not 100% sure. But so he just kind of discusses this with him, and Poirot by this point is older and I guess has a harder time getting around. It is not having a good you know, health-wise time. And so he isn't very involved. He does show up a little bit later in the book, but for the most part, this is a case where he very much is the armchair detective. Instead of going and seeing or being there for the event, he's just kind of sitting back and just kind of like listening to the whole thing. And that aspect of it, I guess, was a little bit disappointing to me, because this is touted as a Poirot mystery, but Poirot, while he does help solve it, is not a very large part of the story. He's very much kind of outside of everything and just kind of being like an assistant. And I guess I was a little bit let down by that, because I was expecting him to be in here a lot more. And that aspect of it actually reminded me a lot more of Sophie Hannah's like new series that I've just read the one book for and will not pick up anymore because it's Poirot fan fiction and I hated it. So I was a little disappointed that this kind of felt more like that, and this is Agatha Christie's actual like works. So that let me down a little bit. I was a little bit confused as to the complicated nature of the crime, but at the end of the day, I still really was impressed by the solution, ultimately, and I did end up giving this 4 stars because, like I said, I was very impressed by the solution. I did not think that was possible at all. I fell for the red herring very hard, and that's right where I went to, and I was just absolutely shocked. So that this could still shock me kind of overrode my disappointment in Poirot not being a larger part of the story overall. So yeah, like I said, I gave it 4 stars, but it's one of those that I don't know if I'm going to read this again at all, because it was good, but it wasn't as enjoyable as some of the others that feature him, like Murder in the Orient Express or 3-Act Tragedy, or, you know, etc. And then we can chat about the book that has made my bit of a reading slump even worse. And that is The Count of Monte Cristo by Alexandre Dumas. Yes, I finally finished it. Here we go. One of the things on the book bucket list we can cross right off. So this copy is probably looking a little worse for wear right now because I discovered that the paint on the masks comes off when your hands are a little moist, and I tend to sweat when I read stressful books. So yeah, you can imagine that this was fun. I can get a workout in my arms from holding this thing up. So we're gonna hold it like that so I don't take even more paint off. It's already happening. Okay, so this book, pretty famous, pretty old. Yeah, this follows Edmond Dante. He is a young man who is basically on the way to having the perfect life. He has the love of his life, a young Catalan woman named Mercedes. They are going to be married soon. He has recently impressed his boss, the owner of the ship that he is a part of. The man's like a merchant, essentially. This is a merchant ship. Is very impressed with him and finds him to be a very bright and responsible young man, and has just like basically told him that he can be like the new captain of this impressive merchant ship. And his father, who and him, they have had some financial struggles. He is on his way to provide a great life for his father, for his fiancée, soon-to-be wife, and himself, and things just seem to be pretty much going perfectly for him. Of course, when things are going perfectly for you, unfortunately, that's when sometimes jealous assholes can come in and try to ruin everything. It's basically what happens for him in this case. three men who are very jealous of him. We have someone who is his neighbor and someone who's been kind of a family friend for a long time. We have the purser on the ship who would rather be the captain instead of him. And then we also have a young man who is in love with Mercedes, Dante's fiance. So they decide that they don't want him to have this slice of happiness. In fact, they want his happiness and they are going to ruin him and steal it. So basically they make this plot to get him in trouble with the law by framing him as a political prisoner. This is at the time when Napoleon has lost power and been exiled, and the French royalty have like come back into power basically, and things are complicated and Napoleon's trying to make a comeback. So being a Napoleon sympathizer at that point was a really dangerous thing that could wind up with you being either killed or at least definitely imprisoned. Unfortunately, Dante is also the victim of a man who is basically like a judge of the courts, who knows that Dante is in fact innocent, but to prove that he is innocent would in fact put this man's career into jeopardy, and so he chooses instead to ignore it entirely and then just have Dante imprisoned without a fair trial whatsoever. So Dante does not know the reason why his life has been ruined. All he knows is that suddenly he cannot even say goodbye to the people he loves, really. He's just thrown in a boat and taken to the Chateau d'If. I don't speak French, so I'm gonna butcher everything in here basically when I'm talking about it. It's not a chateau, it is a prison. It's like really terrible prison. And he is basically taken there and in prison for 14 years, again, not knowing why and not knowing, what has brought him to this point other than, apparently God hates him. That's the only assumption that he can truly make when he's just there. He's in prison for 14 years, but in reality he was supposed to be in prison for the rest of his life, except that he is able, through some ingenious means, to escape and take some more time to, gather plant. He finds like a treasure and make very intense plans to seek out these men who ruined his life and revenge himself upon them. So this is like the original tale of revenge. I honestly love that shit. Like, that's one of my favorite tropes, is someone who has been wrongfully imprisoned or accused and then afterwards gets out and freaking seeks their revenge. Like, that's just a thing that I really like. It's in a lot of different things. We have Sweeney Todd, we have Old Boy, we have Kill Bill, we've got some stuff, different things happen. Everybody's like, I'm gonna get out and then I am gonna hunt these people down and they are gonna, well, mostly be dead. So this honestly had kind of a slow start. It gets pretty dark at various points. But the beginning of the book, so basically this part right here is his life of happiness, and then his troubles and woes and his imprisonment and eventual escape. That is this section right here. This section by itself is pretty intense. It is kind of slow. Things move very slowly at that point. Kind of pick up a little bit, and by the time he's like escaping, and not only that, but it's also really dark. So this is like 200 pages basically of a lot of tough emotions. You know, Dante runs through everything, like insanity at some point, despair. He thinks about killing himself. There is like, it's pretty rough. It gets pretty dark and desperate at times in that section. So that's like, definitely this book has some intense trigger warnings. I would think if you were particularly sensitive to things. There's talks of suicide and plans of committing it, so that's some of that. And then there is also some stuff, a lot of stuff about death. There's some stuff about there's also a lot of things about various ways of killing people, whether through sword fighting, through assassination. You've got a very intense hanging scene that is discussed in this book as well. So, you know, if you are sensitive to particular things, you know, just like keep that in mind if you did want to like pick this up at some point. Anyway, so it's like, this is a very slow start, even though things pick up a little bit towards the end of this section, and then the rest of this is revenge, baby. He makes a discovery of treasure, and things are pretty crazy, and then all of a sudden it kind of shifts narrative away from Dante to other characters that become important later in the story. So it's almost feels like it's a separate book at that point. These other characters end up meeting this mysterious man called the Count of Monte Cristo. Now, Monte Cristo is the island that Dante ends up traveling to and obtaining the money to basically give himself a better life and also exact his revenge on his enemies. So he is not referred to as Dante for the majority of the rest of the book. He is referred to as the Count or the Count of Monte Cristo because, and I find it's a slightly confusing, but I also found that to be a brilliant move, because by that point he isn't Dante anymore. Edmond Dante was a kind, bright, brilliant, honest man who was filled with love and compassion. The Count is not so much. The Count has basically removed himself from that original like person that he was, and he has become this avenging angel sent by God, is basically what his his identity is at that point. So I found that to be, well, at first it was a little confusing. I did find that to be a brilliant thing that Dumas did. It was like, no, we're not going to refer to him as Edmond anymore, because he's not Edmond anymore. He is the Count. That's it. He is this person who is just has a one-track mind set on revenge. So like, this gets pretty crazy. There's at times it felt like, so there were like slow spots at times where I was genuinely wondering what in the hell was happening. Why are we showing this scene? Why are we in the midst of this? Like, it jumps into when you meet these other characters that are going to be important later. For some reason, we're witnessing Carnival in Rome. Why is this happening? Not entirely certain, to be honest, until you start to like have more time with the Count and kind of see exactly how this character has changed emotionally, mentally, since we last saw him. Get to see some more backstory, and the backstory, like, there's some other scenes and different things that take place in here that admittedly, I was really confused as to why those still happen. It just kind of seemed like Dumas was, you know, going off on tangents that didn't make a lot of sense. No, they did indeed make a lot of sense, because these little insignificant scenes and things that happen involving people, that just, it's like, why do these characters exist? Well, it makes sense because it becomes important later, and things, it's all just, it's brilliant how the Count has made these long, like, plans, and these intricate plans, and little things that he's doing. He's basically like a shit stirrer the entire time. He's saying particular things and doing particular things and making these different actions, because it's all part of this intricate like web of deceit that he has basically weaved around his enemies to try to pull them in, and so he can revenge himself upon them. And it's like, it's so freaking brilliant, and Dumas is brilliant for just thinking that far ahead and coming up with this. I believe that this was published originally as like some kind of serial, so it was only being released at sorry, I have to put this down because my arm hurts. Only released at like certain, you know, so much at a time, so it's just, you can tell the amount of thought that went into this, the thought and the planning of tying all of these weird little intricate things together. It's so, my god, it's so freaking intense. There are some things, like I said, there is talks of suicide, there is some slavery, there is a little bit of racism, that's like a certain type of way. But the thing is that you can't, it's hard to tell if the way that that is portrayed is because it's trying to show how much the Count has changed as a person, or if it is just the Count blustering because he wants to impress upon his enemies a certain kind of attitude to ingratiate himself with them, or to like show his power and superiority or some kind of thing. So it's hard, and it's very, I think it's very complicated, because, especially when you think about the fact that Alexandre Dumas himself was half black, I believe, so it makes things, I don't know, it seems very complicated. I feel like I would have to do some more reading on the topic. There is like an introduction in here that I admittedly did not read at the time, because, you know, I just wanted to get right into the story and I didn't want to chance any spoilers happening for me. So I do need to go back and read that at some point. I should probably do that. Yeah, so there's some things that occur in here that I'm not 100% down with. There is a particular scene of a public hanging that was really rough. Like, it was honestly really rough. Like, I like, personally, I have a hard time with that anyway, like, of the varying ways that people can be killed. Like, hangings are definitely one of my least favorite descriptions. I don't know what it is, it's just something about it really freaks me out. So that was one of those scenes that immediately following that particular chapter, I did kind of set the book aside for a little bit, and I think I also filmed like a reading vlog of this, which I am editing, and I'm hoping to get up for you guys soon, and you'll see more of my reactions and like thoughts about this in general. But yeah, I did set the book down for a little while, and I think I went and like did something else for a little bit because I was just kind of really bothered by that, because it really got to me. On the one hand, Didn't like some of how the ending played out. On the other hand, I thought it was the only way, or one, well, there were a couple of ways that the ending could have played out, but I think it was one of the two appropriate ways in which the ending could have gone. And while I wasn't 100% happy with it, I could understand why that was the ending that Dumas chose. And I did like the ending lines of the book. I'm not going to talk about them, I'm not going to share them because it's going to be like some kind of spoiler thing, but I did kind of like it because I felt like it was a certain type of way. I will have, this is like my spoiler-free version of discussing about this. If you're interested in like spoilers or different things like that, I'm gonna do a more, I'll have my vlog that I'll put out, and that will have my reactions as I'm reading it, so you'll hear about a lot of things, and then I also will have my concluding thoughts about the book in general, and I will discuss the ending and things like that. But at the end of the day, like, not to drag this out any further, I guess really, it's just such a big book, and I'm sure the vlog's gonna be really long, but I'm really glad I read this. Like I'd said before, I'd wanted to read this since I was like 8 or 9 years old, and I watched the Wishbone episode of it, and I wanted to read it since then, and I'm really glad that I finally got around to it, because this is probably the best book I have ever read in my entire life. And I am saying that as someone who has read a lot of books, and I'm also saying that as someone who, again, wasn't on board with everything that happened in here and didn't really like a couple of the scenes that were described in here, but it is still, I think, one of the best written books that I've ever read. And like I said, this put me in a reading slump. Like I read this over 2 weekends. I started out, my hubris was great. I wanted to read it in 1 weekend, couldn't do it, made it about halfway through. Read a little bit over the interceding week, and then finished it that following weekend, and after that I just didn't really read that much. I read The Clocks, I read a little bit of Evelina and a little bit of The Maid, and that is all that I read, because I've already been kind of a reading slump of wanting to read but not really having, like, feeling like I could read. And this put me in even more of one, because I was so like blown away by this book, and I just wanted more of it, but at the same time was just like, wow, because trying to read this in 2 weekends really put me inside of the book, and it was an insane experience. I don't think the next time that I decide to reread this, I don't think I could do it the same way. I think I'd have to like just space it out like I normally do with books, because it just felt like I was in it, you know? I just, having devoted that much time to focusing on this thing, that I was just in it. Like, I was with those characters, I was in this world. It was extremely intense experience. And but yeah, I just, this is the one of the best books I have ever read in my entire life. And I think that honestly this is moved into my favorite books of all time list, which is crazy, but yeah, this is on there now. So obviously this is a 5-star read. I loved it so much that I think I am going to have to give The Three Musketeers another go. I did try to read The Three Musketeers in college, and I DNF'd it 2 chapters in because I hated D'Artagnan. But having experienced this book, I think I'm just gonna have to suck it up and make it through those. I think it's like a series. I think there's like 3 or 4 books to that. But yeah, because I want to read more of Dumas's writing. I just want more of it. It's so freaking brilliant. New favorite, guys. It's crazy. So yeah, so this is all that I read this month, but you can tell it was a profound amount anyway. So yeah, so that's what I read in March. I enjoyed these. They were both at times slightly disappointing and also really amazing. I had, despite having only read 2 books, I had a really good reading month, basically. I hope that your month of March went great too. I hope you guys are having a wonderful April, and I will see you in the next video soon.